Hello and welcome to another 9 Letters video. This video is going to be sort of a new segment that I want to do. I'll see how it works for me, but this is the first video of it. This is going to be cards that are good for side decks in this format. The card that I want to talk about today is Dimensional Fissure. This card is amazing when used properly. Now, when I say used properly, because if you're running a certain deck that doesn't rely on the graveyard as much as the opponent's deck does, meaning, well, just look at it this way. Every single deck in today's meta, if you look at it, has something to do with the graveyard. It has something to do that does work with the graveyard. Just if you look at any deck that's top tiering, it has something to do with the graveyard. Or it might even rely on the graveyard itself, like that's its main out to doing things. So, with that said, if your deck doesn't rely on the graveyard as much as your opponent's does, then this is a good card to run. So, if you're running, like I am, Gladiator Beasts, they have some reliance on the graveyard, but they can win duels without using it. Because it's not as fast, but when it completely shuts your opponent down, you don't have to worry about speed. That's not an issue. So, personally, I side 3 in my Gladiator Beast deck, because if I'm going up against something that absolutely relies on the graveyard, like if I'm going up against Lightsworn, or Twilight, because nobody uses Lightsworns anymore, if I'm going up against Twilight, or Dragoonides, or plants that absolutely rely on the graveyard, and then this just banishes them all, then I'm in good standing, because I don't have to rely on the graveyard as much as my opponent does, and by the time it comes for me that I have to use something in the graveyard and I can't, I have another option, whereas my opponent does not. So that's what's great about Dimensional Fissure. Macros Cosmos isn't as I don't think it's as good, because it could be negated with Warning, because it has the effect of summoning Helios. It's a trap, which means that you have to set it first. That's really not that much of a problem as opposed to Fissure, but it could be if your opponent likes to blind MST things, and that's like at the end of your turn, or not at the end of your turn, but it's like at the start of their turn. I don't think that Macros Cosmos is as good, because banishing all cards isn't necessary as banishing monsters, because banishing monsters is all the damage that you need to do, so you don't need to add any extra. And me personally, with GBs, this saves me on War Chariots, so if I were to do a quest, which I normally side when I side in the Fissures, but I like to keep one in there just in case I use the War Chariots. So if I have the War Chariots in the graveyard, because D-Fissure only removes monsters, then I can recycle the War Chariot still. And that helps a hell of a lot, as you'd imagine. Now that's the first issue. That's the first thing with using it properly. You have to use it in a deck that can utilize it, that can, work with it. Or else, if you're using a deck that relies on the graveyard and you side this card, you're going to lock your opponent down, yes, but you're going to lock yourself down too. So you're both going to be at a standstill, and that can go either way. And you don't want that. You want you to have the definite win when you side, because that's the point of siding. Now the other case is using the card in the duel. Now if you decided, okay, I'm going to side in Fissures, you have to make sure you use it at the right time. You want to try, and it depends on really what opening hand you have. I really can't say when to use it if I don't know what deck you're running and what opening hand you have, but we'll use Gladiator Beasts as a reference since I play with them. If I have like Prisma in my hand, and I draw to like Test Tiger and stuff like that, I don't want to activate Fissure immediately, because I might want to go into Test Tiger with Prisma and then dump the monsters in the graveyard, and then be able to go in with it. And remember that with Fissure, if you don't activate Fissure if you activate Fissure after you do all your stuff, then all the monsters are still in the graveyard. They're not removed, clearly, because that's not the effect of the card. So you still have you can use and like summon Darius, especially summon a monster from your graveyard, and then you can bring that back to the deck because it's not removed, it's still in the graveyard. So that's not an issue. But if you were to activate, if you have no other plays than activating D-Fissure on the beginning of like if you go first and you just draw a horrible hand, but you have D fissures, and you use one, you could just summon it, or summon it. You could activate it, then set 2 cards, and then your turn. It's good, but if you draw into something that has you rely on the graveyard, like if that one card, like Mobster Born or something, then you got a problem. But if that's the only play that you can do, then you could do it. But there's backsides to this card. It's good, but it's bad. You just gotta learn how to use it correctly, and it also involves a little bit of luck with you drawing into certain cards, but not that much, which is why I like to side it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.